Intelligence is not just having a high IQ or being good at exams and tests or having a bunch of knowledge and information stored in your head. In fact, intelligence is way more than that. Reality itself is pure intelligence. That intelligence is everywhere. Everything has its own intelligence. So you could argue that even the dumbest person you know is very intelligent. But at the same time, it's pretty clear that there are levels of intelligence and that you as a person can become very intelligent, way more intelligent than you are now, and way more intelligent than the average person. In fact, if you follow the right principles and you do the right practices daily, you can become so much more intelligent than the average person that you would look like an alien in comparison. That if they were to go into your mind, into your ability to understand reality, they would think that it's almost alien to them. Because most people are not doing things daily to increase their intelligence. In fact, they're doing things daily to lower their intelligence. So, what is the most practical advice I can give you straight away in this video? You need to think for yourself. Intelligence is not reading books and watching videos and then regurgitating what other people have said. It is not adopting beliefs and ideologies and dogma from other people. It is thinking for yourself, coming to your own conclusions and understanding reality, taking responsibility, taking authority back for making sense of reality. That is really true intelligence. And intelligence is way more than that as well, which we'll explain by many different examples in this video. But ultimately, if you want to become more intelligent as a person, you need to think for yourself. In fact, you need to do daily philosophy, what I call philosophy maxing. So how do we actually do philosophy maxing? There's 6 pillars to philosophy maxing. Number 1 is questioning. Number 2 is observation, observing. Number 3 is examples and direct experience. Number 4 is not knowing. 5, insight. And number 6 is action. And this is where I would say to start. Literally sit down with a pen and paper or your laptop or your phone and write down the 20 most fascinating questions that you want to know the answer to. Like, what do you genuinely want to know? What do you want to know about reality, right? What are the questions that you just really want to know, right? It could be things like, what is this? What is reality? And how is this possible? Why is there something rather than nothing? Why does something exist rather than nothing? It could be, how do I live the greatest life possible? How do I live the good life? How do I be more loving? What is consciousness? What is spirituality? What is self-development? What is life? What is love? What is wisdom? What is understanding? What is intelligence? And it could be then the follow-up questions, how do you increase XYZ? So what is love? How do I become more loving? What is intelligence? How do I become more intelligent? What is understanding? How do I understand more deeply? What is wisdom? How do I become more wise? Or what is matter? What is energy? What is time? What is space? Right? All sorts of questions. What is suffering? What are the best ways to reduce suffering? So, as you can see, you could literally go on forever. There are so many questions you could be asking, but the thing you want to do is you want to write down the questions that you really want to know the answers to. Then what you want to do is just sit down with a pen and paper, right at the top of the page, just one question that you're going to think about for the next 30 to 60 minutes. So, for example, what is intelligence? And you think from scratch. You just think from scratch. Okay, if you're thinking from scratch, you imagine you're the first person to ever ask the question, the first person to ever really think it through and try to understand that question, right? So you don't refer to what other people have said. You don't refer to the philosophy book that you read or the video that you watched today or, what this like Indian sage said. I've got a book by Ramana Maharshi. You don't refer to that guy. You don't refer to, all your spiritual gurus. or your kind of self-help teachers. You don't refer to anybody. You decide to think from scratch for yourself. The way you do this is, again, you write the question at the top of the page, and then you ask the question in your mind or out loud repeatedly, right? So you ask it and you either try to find and observe this moment, this direct experience. You always go back to your direct experience and tangible examples, right? So if I'm trying to think about what is intelligence, then I would actually bring up examples. What is an example of intelligence? Not just what I think intelligence might be. What's an example of intelligence in real life? Hmm. Well, I think, XYZ person is intelligent. Why? Well, because they're very wise. Or why do I think they're wise? Or because they have the right priorities in life. They're not getting caught up in a bunch of bullshit. Ah, okay. So intelligence might be having the right priorities. So you write that down. Again, it might be that because you've only just started your inquiry, but you write that down. Okay, what's another example of intelligence? Well, I believe that animals are intelligent. So you could write down animals or animal instincts. And then you keep going and you keep bringing up tangible examples. Oh, I think that, XYZ person is intelligent. Oh, why? Well, it's not actually the wisdom thing. It's more, they seem very peaceful and relaxed. And I think that's a form of intelligence. Okay, cool. You write that down. And you keep going through all the different forms of intelligence, the different types of intelligence that you can see out in the world in your experience. And then you also try to, probe into this moment. What is intelligent about this moment? About what is right in front of me, this direct experience? That might lead you to have realizations and insights that existence, right? This moment exists. Existence itself, like just the baseline, existence is intelligence. The fact that something exists, regardless of what it is intelligence. Consciousness is intelligence. Awareness, isness, being is intelligence. Existence, right? If a rock exists, imagine if a rock, it was the only thing that ever existed. There was nothing else other than a rock. That rock would be intelligence. And so you may have realizations like that. But you keep thinking through what is intelligence? And then you can ask, secondary questions like, okay, what's a different type of intelligence? Or, who do I think is intelligent in my life? Or who do I look up to that I think is intelligent? You can ask like smaller kind of secondary questions to kind of help you kind of guide your mind to really kind of try to understand what intelligence is. And then it's also important to not just rush to the answer. When you ask this question, don't just like fill the gap with a bunch of speculation. What you'll find probably by going through, if you were to ask what is intelligence, you'd find that that's not intelligent. To just fill the gap with a bunch of speculation is not that intelligent. It's more intelligent to sit in a state of not knowing. Because by asking the question, you're admitting that you do not know. That you do not know fully the answer. That you have not had all the realizations that could be had around intelligence. By asking the question, that's what you're admitting. And so if you're admitting that, if that's kind of where you're at, because you're asking the question, then it's actually more intelligent to sit in a state of not knowing, just where your mind is kind of calm. You don't actually know. You're not rushing to an answer, and you're observing reality. You're observing the examples you're pulling to mind. Just you could pull any example to mind, right? And ask yourself, is that intelligent? You could see someone, you could pull up an example of someone punching someone in the face. For, just because they got angry at them for a very little reason. Is that intelligent? And you might think immediately, no, that's not intelligent, right? That might be just your gut reaction. That might be true. Or you might just kind of feel it, no, because of this and this and this and this. That's kind of more like speculation, or you're just talking a lot. You're thinking a lot. What would be actually more intelligent is to be like, is that actually intelligent? And to admit you don't quite know. And to also observe your mind. Why do I think it's not intelligent? And to sit in a state of not knowing. In this state of not knowing, paired with asking the right questions, continuing to care about the question, sit in a state of not knowing, pulling up examples and grounding yourself in your direct experience, this moment. When you do that, then you put yourself in a situation, a place where an insight is possible, a realization is possible. And this is different from speculation or guessing. An insight is like, it's almost like when something clicks in your mind, the light bulb moment goes off. And you can have small insights and you can have kind of big insights. So a small insight might be that I realized, I was asking myself, what is intelligence while riding my bike to work? And a small insight I had was that riding a bike is intelligent. That being able to balance is a form of intelligence. And we take that for granted, right? But that was a small insight I had, is like, even something like balancing and riding a bike is intelligent. But then the more I questioned this, I realized that actually everything is intelligent. That reality is intelligent, that existence is intelligence. And you could argue that this is a bigger realization to have, right? A deeper realization to have. And then you can continue to have smaller and bigger realizations. And you can honestly continue to question and ask that question for the next 10 years. And you will probably have more realizations. And honestly, there are so many realizations to have just from one question, right? You may keep asking that one question, and then a month from now, it finally hits you. And it's one of the most obvious things in your life that, let's say, intelligence is love. And all of a sudden, that realization completely changes your perspective. If it becomes so obvious to you that love is extremely intelligent, then all of a sudden, if you're trying to become more intelligent, you realize, oh, I have to become more loving. And then that may lead you on to the question of, well, what is love? And how do I be more loving? And you see where this goes, right? There is so many questions you can ask. There is so much contemplation, philosophy that you can be doing. In fact, is something that you should be doing every single day. And by doing this process of pure philosophy, what I call philosophy maxing, right? And to give you a bit more information on this, the 6 pillars is questioning, observation, not knowing, insight, action, and then I forgot one, which was like kind of like grounding yourself in examples and direct experience. If you do that every single day, this is literally the single biggest way to increase your intelligence. Because intelligence is not regurgitating a bunch of information and knowledge that you got from a book or a video to sound smart to your friends. Intelligence is the ability to understand reality, is the ability to think for yourself, to become autonomous, to take back your own authority, to take back your own responsibility on making sense of reality and understanding. And intelligence is a lot more as well. But it's not, just high IQ or just having knowledge or just being good at exams. I can tell you that for certain. So, if you want to become more intelligent, start thinking for yourself, start philosophy maxing, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.